city of Ho Chi Minh, once Saigon, was alive with a mix of modern vibrancy and old-world charm. Bustling markets lined the streets, neon lights flickered from every corner, and the sweet scent of street food lingered in the air. Amidst the chaos and the new skyscrapers, there stood one building that defied time, Hotel Majestic. It was an old French colonial building, nestled by the riverbank, its faded white walls and arched windows reminiscent of a time long past. To the people of the city, the hotel was both an iconic landmark and a piece of history. However, to those who had stayed there, it was something much darker, a place where history bled into the present, and the echoes of the past refused to stay quiet. It was in this hotel that Evan, a writer from the United States, found himself staying one humid evening in the middle of summer. Evan had come to Vietnam for a series of interviews and to explore the city's growing interest in tourism. He was looking for inspiration for his next novel, but little did he know, he was about to stumble upon a story far more terrifying than any he could have imagined. It started with a letter, arriving in his inbox late one evening. It was a personal invitation to stay at the Hotel Majestic, an offer that seemed too good to pass up, free lodging for a week. The email was signed by an unnamed source, simply stating, "We think you would find our hotel inspiring. Your stay will be unforgettable." Curious and intrigued by the cryptic tone, Evan responded. A day later, he was booked in room 413, the best room in the hotel, and the details for his stay were confirmed. Despite the oddness of the situation, Evan saw it as an opportunity. The hotel had history, after all, and he was drawn to places like that. He loved old buildings, especially those with stories to tell. Evan arrived at the Hotel Majestic with little fanfare, the hotel blending seamlessly with the modern city around it. As he entered the lobby, he was struck by the faint, musty smell of age that seemed to seep from the walls. The grand chandelier above him swayed slightly, casting shadows across the marble floor. The bellman, a stoic man in a vintage uniform, greeted him with a silent nod before leading him to the elevator. The elevator creaked as it ascended, its interior dimly lit with soft golden light. Evan looked around, noticing the deep red velvet curtains lining the elevator's walls and the brass fittings that gleamed under the faint light. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if the elevator itself was reluctant to move, as if it had witnessed too many stories of sorrow and longing over the years. When Evan arrived at room 413, he felt the first real sense of unease. The door opened with an old, echoing groan, revealing a space that seemed frozen in time. The room was elegant yet worn, luxurious in its day but now faded, as if decades of stories had unfolded within these walls. The bed was draped in silk sheets, the furniture dark wood, and the curtains drawn tight, blocking out the oppressive heat of the outside world. As Evan set his suitcase down, he noticed a peculiar feature, the mirror on the wall opposite the bed. It was large, with an ornate frame, but the glass was strangely distorted, giving off a faint, rippling effect. He approached it, puzzled by its warped appearance, and as he stared into the reflection, he felt a shiver run down his spine. For just a moment, his reflection seemed to linger longer than he did, as if something behind him had moved. But when he turned around, there was nothing there. Evan shrugged it off, attributing the moment to the dim lighting and his overactive imagination. He unpacked his things and decided to take a walk around the hotel to familiarize himself with the surroundings. The lobby was quiet, and the hallway leading to the hotel's old ballroom was eerily still, as though the building had forgotten what it once was. The following evening, Evan decided to spend time in the hotel bar. As he sipped his drink, a strange sense of familiarity came over him, as though he had been here before. The velvet curtains, the dim light, the wooden beams above, everything felt so hauntingly familiar, as though they were echoes of another life. He shook off the thought and engaged in conversation with the bartender, an older man named Hong. Hong was friendly, but his eyes always seemed to hold a certain sadness, a weariness that had not come from age alone. As they spoke about the city's history, Evan asked about the hotel's past. "Oh, the Majestic has been around for a long time," Hong said, wiping down a glass. "It has a rich history, and some dark stories." Evan leaned in. What do you mean by dark stories? Hong hesitated, glancing over his shoulder before speaking in a low voice. Some say the hotel is haunted. There have been disappearances. Strange events. People come here, but they don't leave the same. Or sometimes, they don't leave at all. He paused, then added, Room 413, many guests have stayed there. But not all of them stay for long. The bartender's cryptic words lingered in Evan's mind as he finished his drink. That night, as he returned to his room, he could feel an unsettling presence in the air. The hallway seemed longer, darker, and when he reached his door, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching him from the other side. The night passed in uneasy silence. The strange feeling in the air grew stronger. Evan couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in the plush bed, his mind restless. The mirror in his room had begun to unsettle him even more. He hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something had been lurking just behind him in its reflection. Around midnight, Evan rose from the bed, unable to ignore the pull of the mirror any longer. He stepped toward it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. As he stood before it, the air grew colder, and the mirror rippled, distorting his reflection once more. His pulse quickened. But this time, he noticed something strange, a shadow, barely visible, creeping behind him in the reflection. Evan spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty. His breath caught in his throat, and he stared back at the mirror. The shadow lingered just behind his own reflection, stretching unnaturally long. It seemed to grow, expanding into a figure, a dark, shapeless form. The air became heavy, thick with an oppressive energy. The reflection in the mirror was no longer his own. It was someone else, a figure dressed in tattered clothes, standing in the same spot. Suddenly, the mirror cracked. Evan recoiled in fear, backing away from the shattering glass. The figure in the reflection remained, staring back at him with hollow, empty eyes. A low whisper emanated from the mirror, the voice of a woman crying softly, and then, a sharp scream that filled the room, echoing in Evan's ears. He spun around in terror, but when he looked back at the mirror, it was whole again. The figure was gone. The following morning, Evan was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. He visited the hotel's old archives, a small, dusty room in the back of the building where the hotel's history was kept in faded records. There, hidden among the musty books and yellowing papers, Evan discovered the truth about the hotel's past. Hotel Majestic had once been a thriving social hub during the French colonial era, attracting dignitaries, travelers, and businessmen from all over the world. But in the 1940s, during the turbulent years of the Vietnam War, the hotel had a much darker history. It was said that the hotel had been used as a base for military officials and intelligence officers, with the building itself serving as a prison for many who dared to oppose the French occupation. Some of these prisoners, including women, were held in the hotel's lower levels. Their lives ended in the very rooms Evan now occupied. In room 413, the site of his strange experiences, a woman named Mai Lin had once stayed. She was an outspoken activist during the war, arrested and tortured in the hotel's underground cells. According to the records, Mai Lin had been executed in the very room Evan was staying in. It was said that her screams could be heard through the hotel late at night, echoing through the hallways, but no one ever spoke of it publicly. The more Evan read, the more the hotel's haunting presence took hold of him. He couldn't escape the idea that he was somehow connected to the spirit of Mai Lin. Every detail, every room in the hotel, seemed to have been designed to bring him closer to her, closer to the unresolved sorrow and rage that had been trapped in those walls for decades. Evan couldn't leave now. The mystery had consumed him, and his mind was filled with the voices and shadows of the hotel. That night, as he lay in bed, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. He wasn't sure whether they were real or a product of his overactive imagination, but the footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside his door. The door creaked open. Evan froze, unable to move. He couldn't bring himself to look up, but he could feel the presence, like a cold wind sweeping through the room. Then, slowly, a shadow appeared at the foot of his bed. A figure, dressed in old, tattered clothing, stood before him. The woman's face was obscured by a veil of dark, matted hair. She was silent, but her presence filled the room. The air grew cold, and the whispers began again. Evan could feel them surrounding him, whispers of pain, betrayal, and anguish. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the woman spoke. "You are not supposed to be here." Her words felt like ice against his skin. He tried to move, but his body was paralyzed, trapped in the grip of an unseen force. The woman reached out a hand, her fingers long and bony, and touched his forehead. The coldness spread through him, and the world around him seemed to blur, becoming distant and unreal. In that moment, he understood. Mai Lin, the woman who had suffered in this hotel, had never left. Her soul was trapped in the hotel, bound to the walls by the cruelty of those who had taken her life. She had been waiting for someone, anyone, who could understand her pain, someone to bear witness to the torment she had endured. As the shadowy figure faded, Evan felt his body released from its invisible grip. He was free, but he knew that the hotel's curse would never end. The spirits of those who had died within its walls would continue to haunt the rooms, seeking vengeance, seeking peace. And in the silence that followed, the hotel was no longer just a building. It was a monument to the suffering of those who had come before him, a place where the past would never die, and the dead would never leave. In the heart of Tokyo, amid the bustling streets filled with neon lights and the endless hum of city life, there stood a small, unassuming building nestled between towering skyscrapers. Its faded sign read, "Yum no Koya, Dream Shelter." A name that seemed innocent enough, but those who knew the dark secrets behind the walls of this establishment would never look at it the same way again. Yum no Koya was a love hotel, a discreet place where couples could rent rooms by the hour for their private encounters. These establishments were common in Japan, offering a safe and quiet space for people to meet without prying eyes. On the surface, the hotel appeared like any other of its kind, offering hourly rates and dimly lit rooms with heart-shaped beds and soft music playing in the background. But beneath the surface, there was something far darker at play, a lingering presence that refused to leave. It was late October when Maya, a young office worker in her mid-20s, received an invitation to a hotel she had never heard of before. She had just broken up with her boyfriend and was in need of a quiet getaway, somewhere far from the bustling noise of Tokyo. The invite was peculiar, handwritten on a simple piece of paper with only the hotel's name and address scrawled on it. Intrigued and a bit lonely, she decided to go, hoping to find some peace and quiet, even if it was in the most unexpected of places. The moment she arrived at Yum no Koya, she felt an odd chill run down her spine. The air around the building seemed heavier than it should have been, and the streetlights nearby flickered in an unnatural rhythm. Still, she shrugged it off as a trick of the mind. After all, she was simply here to relax for the night. When she entered, she was greeted by a silent, middle-aged man behind the front desk. His face was pale, and his eyes were hollow, as though he had not slept in days. But his smile was polite, and his voice was smooth as he handed her the room key. "The special room has been reserved for you, Miss Maya. Please enjoy your stay," he said with an eerie calmness that unsettled her. Maya nodded and took the key without further thought, trying to ignore the strange atmosphere that clung to the hotel like an invisible fog. The lobby was silent, with no other guests in sight. She made her way up to the room, feeling an odd sense of being watched, though she could see no one. As she entered the room, she noticed something unsettling. The walls were painted in dark reds and blacks, the lighting dim and intimate, as one would expect in a love hotel. However, the air in the room felt thick, and there was an undeniable sense of heaviness that weighed on her chest. The bed, heart-shaped and covered with a red velvet blanket, seemed almost too inviting. But as her eyes traveled around the room, they were drawn to an ornate mirror on the wall. The mirror was framed with intricate carvings of roses, their petals so finely etched that they seemed almost alive. But what unsettled Maya the most was the way the mirror reflected the room. It was as though it didn't reflect the present moment but instead a moment long past, distant shadows lingering in the reflection. She shook her head, blaming the unsettling atmosphere for her overactive imagination. She set her bag down on the bedside table, trying to calm herself. The faint sound of rain pattered on the window, and she took a deep breath, attempting to relax. That was when she first heard it. A soft, melodic hum echoed through the room, so faint at first that Maya thought she had imagined it. But as the humming grew louder, she realized it was coming from behind the wall. It sounded like a woman's voice, soft and haunting, singing a lullaby, its melody both beautiful and sorrowful. Confused, Maya stood up and approached the wall, pressing her ear against it, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. Her heart began to race, and she pulled away, her palms sweaty with anxiety. "I'm just tired," she whispered to herself. "I need sleep." But sleep didn't come. As the night wore on, the humming continued. It became louder, clearer, as though it were coming from within the very walls of the hotel itself. Maya lay awake, the chill creeping deeper into her bones, unsure of whether to leave or stay. The sound seemed to draw closer, moving like a whisper through the cracks in the walls. Maya's curiosity had grown too great by the time dawn broke. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong about the place. The humming continued throughout the night, and the unsettling sensation of being watched only grew stronger. In the morning, she ventured downstairs to the lobby to find the receptionist, hoping for some explanation. As she approached the desk, she was greeted by the same pale man. But this time, his smile was absent, replaced by a look of deep concern. "You should leave," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only Maya could hear. "This place, it has a past. A very dark one." "Past? What do you mean?" Maya asked, confused. The man hesitated before speaking again, his eyes darting nervously toward the back of the hotel. No Koya was built decades ago. A long time ago, it was a place where lovers could come and escape the world for a night. But it wasn't always peaceful. A woman named Akemi, a beautiful singer, worked here many years ago. She was one of the most popular entertainers at the time. She would sing for the guests, but one night, she fell in love with a man who, well, he was not as he seemed. They had a secret affair. A forbidden one. But one night, he betrayed her, and she couldn't live with it. The man paused, as if the memories were painful. His voice dropped even lower. "She hanged herself in room 12. The room you stayed in. Her soul was never able to leave. It is said she still sings, mourning her lost love. She haunts the halls of the hotel, luring those who are vulnerable, like you." Maya felt a cold shiver creep up her spine. "You're saying, the singing was her?" The man nodded, his face pale and drawn. "Yes." Akemi's voice still echoes through the walls. "She draws people into her sadness, hoping they will feel the same pain she felt." Maya backed away from the desk, her heart racing. She had stayed in the room where Akemi had died, the room where her soul remained trapped. The thought was almost too much to bear. She had to leave, to escape the hotel before the haunting grew stronger. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something strange, the mirror in the lobby, reflecting the scene behind her. A woman's silhouette, barely visible in the reflection, stood in the hallway behind her. Maya's breath caught in her throat, and she spun around to find the hallway empty. But when she glanced back at the mirror, the silhouette was gone. As Maya fled from the hotel, she couldn't escape the sound of Akemi's song. It followed her, like an invisible force tugging at her heart, pulling her back to the hotel. The further she walked, the more distant the voice seemed, but it never truly left her mind. The melody danced in her thoughts, a haunting lullaby that refused to fade. By the time she reached the street, the sky had grown dark. The neon lights of Tokyo flickered in the distance, casting an eerie glow over the city. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was calling her back to that hotel. No matter how far she walked, no matter how many times she turned away, she felt her feet pull her back toward the hotel, as though the song itself had bound her to its fate. The closer she got to the building, the louder the song became. By the time she reached the hotel's entrance, she realized she was no longer in control of her body. She was walking toward the door, her hands shaking as she grasped the handle. Her heart raced with fear, but there was no turning back. She had to face whatever it was that haunted the hotel. When she entered, the receptionist was gone, and the lobby was silent. The faint humming filled the air, louder now, almost deafening in its intensity. Her heart thudded in her chest as she walked toward the elevator, the sound of her footsteps drowned by the relentless singing. The elevator doors opened, revealing a long, empty hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. At the end of the corridor, the door to room 12 stood ajar, a faint light spilling out from within. Maya hesitated but knew she had to go. She had to face the truth. She walked toward the door, the song becoming louder with each step. As she stepped inside, the room was shrouded in shadow, but there was a figure at the window. Akemi. The woman's pale face turned toward her, a ghostly smile on her lips. Her eyes were hollow, filled with sorrow and regret. "Come closer," Akemi's voice whispered, her lips not moving. The song continued, growing louder until it seemed to fill the room entirely. Maya stepped forward, drawn by the woman's grief-stricken eyes. She could feel the weight of the sorrow in the room, like a thick fog enveloping her. The closer she got, the more the song seemed to beckon her. And then, as if everything clicked into place, Maya realized the terrible truth. Akemi was not just singing for herself. She was singing for anyone who dared to listen, luring them into the abyss with her sorrow, her longing for the man who betrayed her. She wanted to make them feel her pain, she wanted them to share her fate. Maya turned to flee, but the door slammed shut. The sound of Akemi's haunting melody filled the room, and the world around her seemed to dissolve into darkness. The next day, the hotel stood empty, its doors locked tight. No one knew what had happened to Maya, and her disappearance was never explained. The hotel was abandoned, its dark past and tragic legend swallowed by time. But sometimes, late at night, people passing by the street still hear it, the faint sound of a woman's song, drifting on the wind. It is soft at first, almost like a whisper, but if you listen closely, it grows louder, more insistent. The melody of Akemi's ghostly lullaby calls out, and if you are unlucky enough to hear it, you may find yourself drawn to the hotel, unable to resist the pull of the haunted love hotel. Tucked away in the dense jungles of Bali, near the sacred Lempuyang temple, there lies a small, almost forgotten hotel named simply the Lempuyang Hotel. This place had once been a charming refuge for weary travelers seeking spiritual solace and natural beauty. Now, however, it was steeped in dark rumors and whispered tales, of shadows that moved on their own, of voices heard in the dead of night, and of guests who had vanished without a trace. Arya, a young documentary filmmaker from Jakarta, had heard these stories and felt an irresistible pull. Her next project was to explore haunted places across Indonesia, and the Lempuyang Hotel was said to be one of the most haunted locations in the entire archipelago. Determined to capture the truth, Arya packed her equipment and made the journey to Bali's remote northeast corner. Upon arrival, the thick scent of frangipani flowers mingled with the humidity in the air. The hotel itself was a traditional Balinese structure of wood and stone, with carved pillars and tiled roofs. Despite the tropical beauty, Arya immediately sensed an unsettling energy surrounding the place. The staff were polite but distant, their eyes casting nervous glances when the subject of the hotel's history came up. It was said that the Lempuyang Hotel was built over an ancient burial ground, sacred to the Balinese people and protected by powerful spiritual entities. The hotel's proximity to the Lempuyang Temple, known as the Gateway to Heaven, meant the land was saturated with spiritual energy, both light and dark. Local legends spoke of monks and priests who had been buried there centuries ago, their spirits unable to find rest. Some nights, guests claimed to hear chanting echoing from deep within the hotel's walls, accompanied by cold gusts of wind that swept through sealed rooms. Others saw figures clad in traditional robes moving silently down hallways or glimpsed faces peering from dark corners. Arya was eager to capture these phenomena on film but remained cautious. Her first night at the hotel was restless. The air inside her room felt unnaturally cold despite the tropical heat outside. She awoke to distant chanting, a rhythmic, guttural sound that seemed both ancient and otherworldly. Grabbing her camera, she tiptoed into the hallway, but the corridor was empty, silent except for the faint rustling of leaves outside. The next day, Arya spoke with an elder staff member named Weiyan, who told her a chilling story. Many years ago, a monk named Putra had lived at the temple and had been charged with guarding the sacred burial ground. When the hotel was constructed, it disturbed the resting place of many monks and villagers. Putra's spirit was said to haunt the hotel to this day, appearing in the form of a tall, serene monk dressed in saffron robes, his face hidden beneath the shadow of his hood. Visitors who encountered him often described an overwhelming sense of calm and sorrow. But others reported feeling an intense dread, as if the spirit was warning intruders to leave the sacred ground undisturbed. Weiyan warned Arya to respect the land and not to provoke the spirits. They protect this place, he said solemnly, but their patience has limits. Arya's research and exploration led her to the infamous Room 13, a room that no guest willingly stayed in for long. It was said to be the epicenter of the hotel's supernatural activity. According to legend, a guest had died mysteriously in Room 13 many years ago, and since then, strange phenomena intensified around that room. On her third night, Arya found herself inexplicably drawn to Room 13. Despite warnings from the staff, curiosity overwhelmed her. She entered the room, feeling the temperature drop sharply. The atmosphere was thick with a palpable energy, as if the walls themselves were alive. As she set up her camera, she felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw a figure, a monk in flowing orange robes, standing silently in the corner. The figure's eyes were hollow, glowing faintly in the dark. Arya's breath hitched, her heart pounding as the figure moved closer without a sound. Suddenly, the chanting began again, louder and more intense. The room trembled slightly, and Arya's camera captured a blur of motion. The monk's apparition reached out a hand, and Arya felt a coldness spread through her entire body. Determined to understand and appease the restless spirits, Arya sought the help of a local priestess, Nyoman, who specialized in ancient Balinese rituals. Nyoman explained that the disturbed spirits could only be calmed through a purification ceremony performed on the burial grounds and the hotel itself. The ceremony was to take place at midnight, with offerings of flowers, incense, and sacred water. Nyoman instructed Arya and the hotel staff to participate in the ritual to cleanse the negative energies. As night fell, the participants gathered in a circle, chanting prayers in Balinese. The air grew heavy, the wind howling through the trees as shadows flickered on the walls. At one point, the chanting was interrupted by a sudden scream, a sound not of this world. Arya saw the monk's apparition appear again, hovering over the circle, his expression one of profound sorrow. The ritual culminated in the priestess sprinkling holy water across the hotel grounds. Slowly, the oppressive energy lifted. The chanting faded into silence, replaced by a gentle breeze that carried away the last traces of darkness. In the days that followed, the hotel felt different, lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. Guests who had experienced strange phenomena reported no further disturbances. Arya's footage captured the eerie events, but also the peace that followed the ritual. Though the spirits were appeased, the hotel remained a place of respect and caution. The sacred burial ground beneath it was a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the power of unresolved history. Arya left the Lumpuyang Hotel with a profound sense of humility and awe. The footage she took became part of a documentary that shared the story of the haunted hotel, the protective spirits, and the ritual that brought peace. And though the hotel's shadows had quieted, the legend of the Lempuyang Hotel would continue to echo through the halls, a haunting reminder that some places hold memories that refuse to fade.